Hello, everyone. So my name is Jacqueline. For those who haven't met me before or heard one of my other presentations, I work at Agilec Employment Services in Ajax, and we help people with all different parts of their job search. So today I'm going to be talking about the interview stage. You have sent out your resume or your application, and you've gotten a call or you've gotten an email confirmation that they want to have an interview with you. And this causes a lot of stress and anxiety for people. So what do we do now? At the end of this workshop, you will have the following: a plan for what you will wear, because you want to make a great first impression, knowledge of what to expect during the interview, an understanding of some points of interview etiquette that you should keep in mind when preparing and actually participating in an interview, what kinds of interview questions to expect, and types of interviews that you may actually find yourself in, and how to answer some of your interview questions using the STAR method. So congratulations. Getting an interview is a big deal. It means that you meet the qualifications for the job that you've applied for. But what really is the purpose of the interview? The purpose of the interview is to determine a couple things: whether your resume and your real life skills match up, how you compare with the other candidates who have applied for the job. And then this one is really important: if they're actually going to like working with you. I did a resume workshop last week, and I talked about the fact that your resume is your marketing tool, and it helps the employer to understand what your hard skills are, whether you can actually do the job. But the interview is how the employer determines who you are. So not so much what you can do, that's important, and they're going to ask you questions about that, but they're also trying to assess who you are as an individual and as a potential employee, and whether they can see themselves working with you. So here we've got a big bubble. It says, are they the right fit? So you've got one person talking to the other person across the table, but who's interviewing who? And this is something that we like to tell our candidates as well. We get really stressed out when we're looking for a job, and it's a hard time because you're thinking about maybe, how am I going to pay my bills? How am I going to take care of my family? All of these different things. But as much as an employer or potential employer is interviewing you, you are also, through the process, interviewing them to determine, do I want to work with these people? Do I want to work at this particular company? And sometimes if we can see the interview process that way, as kind of a mutual dialogue, it helps us to overcome some of our nerves. So pop quiz. Just think about this for a second. How long do you think it takes to make a first impression? Do you think it's 5 seconds, 30 seconds, 5 minutes, or half an hour? Experts say that it only takes 5 seconds to make a first impression. So you really want it to be the best 30 seconds that you could possibly make. Dressing for success. So this is part of the first impression. How do I look when I come into the office or I come onto the work site? This is a visual way to show that you will fit in at the company. It shows that you're enthusiastic about the job. You took the time to dress appropriately for the work environment that you're hoping to be hired into. And it shows that you're prepared for the interview. You've probably done some research on what the dress code is in that sector or that particular company. And so they know that you're taking this seriously. For women, there's a couple different ways that you could potentially dress, and these are just suggestions. They're not hard and fast rules. You could wear a tailored skirt or tailored slacks. You could wear a blazer of some kind, so something coordinating. Nice blouse, nothing with too many patterns or stripes or anything that's jarring to the eye. You don't want to wear really, really high heels necessarily, maybe something kind of low or flat. Tights if you're wearing a skirt. And we've got here purse or briefcase. You don't have to take one of these with you, but if you're going to carry your items in something, then a purse or briefcase versus maybe bringing a knapsack with you tends to look a little bit more professional. For men, again, you're going for a professional look. So you want to wear a tailored suit jacket and pants if it's appropriate for the place that you're working. If it's not as formal, then perhaps you don't have to wear a suit jacket. You can just wear a button-down shirt and a tie, or even maybe just a shirt, no tie, definitely tucked into your slacks, dress shoes if you have them, or shoes that are not scuffed, belt. And then again, we've got, if you have materials to bring with you, a briefcase or portfolio. And this one is important for everyone. You want to make sure that you are well groomed. So for men, that could be shaving. For women, it could be making sure that your hair is well kept. And there's nothing really distracting about the way you look when the interviewer is interviewing you. That's the purpose of this, to bring forth a professional image, but also to make sure that you're limiting any distractions. So you're preparing for the interview. How are you going to do that? We always recommend to people that they research the company via the internet, friends, or network. So you may know people that work at the company that you're applying to and have gotten the interview with. You definitely can do internet searches. If you have a LinkedIn account, you go onto LinkedIn. Many companies now have a LinkedIn company profile, so you can go there and get lots of information about that company. And you want to research so that you have something to talk about at the interview. You want to review your skills, your strengths, and your assets, because this is what you're going to be talking to the employer about why you are a better fit for this particular job than the other candidates that they're bringing in for an interview. You want to have questions prepared about the job, and you want to rehearse your answers for possible questions that they're going to ask you. So if you have a trusted friend or a family member, or you're working with an employment service provider, somebody that you trust that you could perhaps do a mock interview with beforehand, so just to get some practice, we always recommend that you practice. It helps you to relieve some of the nerves if you know some of the talking points that you want to refer to. It helps you to identify in advance the particular skills and strengths that you want to highlight for the employer, and maybe to have some stories prepared of previous things that you've done at other jobs that you want to share with them because you think it'll wow them and they'll consider you a better candidate. You want to prepare your outfit in advance. So we talked about that before. And you want to check your body language. So if you have the chance to do a mock interview, ask the person who is pretending to be the employer to give you some feedback about your body language. Are you smiling during the interview? Or are you kind of scowling or making no facial expressions, which sometimes happens when we're nervous or anxious? And how could that be perceived by the person across the table from you? Are you maybe using nervous gestures that could be distracting? So are you playing with or twirling your hair when you're talking because you're nervous? You want to print copies of your resume, cover letter, and references and bring that with you. You're not necessarily going to present them unless you're asked for them. You want to have your resume in case the interviewers for some reason have misplaced your resume and cover letter. You can quickly just give them a copy. And even to have it in front of you while you're talking to the interviewers helps you to be able to really focus on some of the skills and strengths that you wanted to highlight for them. You want to hang on to the references in case they ask you for references. Sometimes they will during an interview. Sometimes that comes afterwards. But it's always a good idea to have it handy just in case. And this one's really important. You want to research how you're going to get to the interview location. So you want to check, if I'm taking the bus to my interview, what's the bus schedule? How close does the bus actually run to the building in which I'm going to have my interview? Do I need to get off the bus and then walk another 10 minutes? Does the bus only run every 40 minutes? Those types of things are really important because you want to get there on time and without the stress of running late. If you're going to be doing a video interview, which I'm going to talk about a little bit later, you may not be checking obviously location because you're going to be at home, but you want to check your technology to make sure that it's actually working and you're prepared in advance. So, how do we ace the interview and make a good impression? Well, we need to know in advance maybe the type of interview that we're walking into. And when you speak to the potential interviewer on the phone, when they're setting up the meeting for you, or you get an email, they will typically tell you the type of interview that you're going to have. And if they don't, there's no harm in you asking, will I only be interviewing with you, or will there be other people interviewing me at the same time? You could typically have a one-on-one interviewer, so just yourself and one other person who's a representative of the company interviewing you. You could have a panel or board, so where there's two or more people interviewing you at the same time. We've done interviews here where there's two or three people interviewing a candidate for a variety of reasons. Maybe you're going to be working with different departments, and so there's a representative from each department who participates in the interview to get a sense of whether or not you're going to be a good candidate. And then there are group interviews. So this could be one or more interviewers interviewing a group of candidates. So if there's an organization looking to hire a large number of people at the same time, for the sake of efficiency, they may look at interviewing candidates in a group. Some organizations will also do group interviews to see how people react to and respond to other individuals kind of in a competitive type of environment. And that helps them to see whether you work well under stress, how you deal with competition. So there are a variety of reasons why interviewers would choose one of these particular types. Then, given our current pandemic situation, you may actually not do an in-person interview. You may be doing an interview over the phone or via video. So using Zoom or Skype or GoToMeeting or some other type of platform. So again, different things to be aware of when you are looking at doing a video interview, which I'm going to talk about later. For a phone interview, you want to practice some of the same things in terms of preparing that we're going to talk about. One of the most important things to remember about talking to people on the phone is they can hear your expressions. It sounds weird because you can't see me, but if I'm talking to someone on the phone, I can tell by the tone of their voice whether or not they're actually smiling, whether they feel relaxed. So again, that's something that you maybe want to practice in advance if you know that you're going to be having the interview over the phone. How does that actually sound? There are different styles of interviews as well. So typically you would have a structured interview with structured questions. They're asked in a very formal way. Sometimes the people that are asking the questions are writing down your answers. They may be typing your answers into a computer if they're doing it via video, but it's quite formal. Everyone's taking notes, and even the person who's being interviewed is often welcome to take notes as well in case you have questions later on during the process. And then there can be unstructured interviews. So these, depending upon the job, can take place at like a coffee shop or someplace outside of the office because they want to have a more relaxed and conversational environment, depending upon level of the job. I've heard of candidates being asked to go to like an evening interview and be with a panel, and they're talking over dinner. And again, that gives a sense of who is this individual, how are they going to conduct themselves at work with the people that potentially they're going to be hired to work with, and potentially our customers. So types of questions that you could be asked. You could be asked open-ended questions. So tell me about yourself. Everyone hates that question. Tell me about yourself. What do you tell them, right? That's an open-ended question. You could have very direct questions, again, also open-ended, but tell me, what are your greatest strengths? I'm actually looking for very specific information when I ask you that question. You'll find this a lot in interviews. Situational. So, what would you do if? I want to get a sense of your train of thought. I want to get a sense of what you would do in a particular situation that may come up on the job if we hired you. And then this one is very popular, behavioral. Tell me about a time when you dot, 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 and they'll fill that in. And they say that the best predictor of future behavior is past behavior, which is why we ask behavioral interviews in a question. Whatever you tell me you did in the past, given a situation, is very likely what you're going to do in the future, given that same or similar situation. And that helps the employer to determine, is that in line with maybe the internal policies and procedures that we have at our company? Is that how we conduct ourselves? Is that how we treat our customers? Is that how we treat our coworkers? Would this person fit in based on what they've told me in the past about how they've dealt with the situation and what they're likely to do in the future? So tell me about yourself. What am I supposed to tell you? You can tell the employer about your years of experience, your qualifications or education as it relates to the job that you're applying for, any specialities that you have, so job-specific skills. What skills, what assets do you have as a candidate that are very specific to this job and make you a better candidate for the position than someone else that they're going to interview? You definitely want to bring up any accomplishments or awards. And we talked in the resume workshop about accomplishment statements and looking back at your previous or current positions for any time that you received an award or particular recognition for a job well done. In the interview is a great time to bring these up again because it shows a lot of different things. It can show work ethic. It can show how you solved a problem. It can show how you went above and beyond at work. And that will definitely be impressive for the individuals who are interviewing you. You want to also talk about any transferable skills that you have. We hear a lot from employers that we can teach the hard skills, but we can't necessarily teach some of these soft skills or transferable skills. So can I teach someone to be a good communicator? I can with some work, but if you have instances where you can demonstrate from your previous experience that you're a good communicator, if you can express during the interview that you're a great communicator, that will go a long way. If you're able to demonstrate how in the past you've used people skills to solve a problem or to increase customer service satisfaction ratings, that can go a long way with impressing an employer and them considering you for the particular position that you're being interviewed for. And why you're excited about the job. An employer wants to feel that you actually want to work for them and want to work with them and at that company doing that job, rather than I'm just looking for any job and if you hire me, that'll be great. An employer wants to feel almost like you're courting them. That sounds weird, but that you actually want to work there, that you've done some research, that you're interested specifically in working with them, that you have reasons why, maybe how your values line up with theirs, maybe how some of the community work they do speaks to the community work that you're doing as well in your own free time. But they want to get a sense of excitement from you about joining the organization. So what are your strengths? Again, we want to talk about your soft skills, transferable skills, any specific hard skills that you have that are related to the job. And then this one can be tricky. What are your weaknesses? And people are like, why would they ask me what my weaknesses are? Well, The key with this one is to show that you're a person who can grow. So you're going to mention what the weakness was, but how you've improved through your own initiative on that weakness, how you've gotten better, and that it's not as much a weakness because you've been able to reflect and to grow in your career and in that particular skill area. You don't want to say that you're a perfectionist. A lot of people say that, or that I work too hard, or that I don't have any weaknesses, or that my weakness is chocolate cake, which is completely irrelevant, because those sound like canned answers and not necessarily something that you've actually put some thought into and can demonstrate how you've grown as a person in your career. So the next types of questions are situational questions. When responding to a situational question, your answer should reflect how you would react in a hypothetical situation. So, what would you do if a customer was rude to you? They want to know, because maybe this happens, you're applying for a customer service manager job and you're the person who gets the calls when someone's upset. What are you going to do when that person calls you and is rude and screaming on the phone? Are you going to maintain your composure? Are you going to represent the company in a positive light? Or are you going to overreact with that person and perhaps be rude back to them? What would you do if your boss assigned you a task you didn't understand? So they may want to know, are you someone who's going to ask for clarification? Are you going to ask for help? Who are you going to ask for help? Are you going to do some research to understand the task better? Or are you just going to kind of throw up your hands and hide your head in the sand and hope for the best? And what would you do if you realized you sent out a report with a mistake on it? So again, the employer wants to know, what would you do if one of these potentially negative situations arose in their workplace? And it helps them to check level of integrity, what you think is the right thing to do versus the wrong thing to do. Does that match up with how they operated that particular organization? The next set of questions, which are very popular questions, are behavioral questions. So when you're responding to a behavioral interview question, your answer will typically be a story about how you overcame a problem or accomplished something in the past. And as I mentioned before, the reason for this is the belief that past behavior is a predictor of future behavior. So whatever you've done in the past in a particular situation is likely what you're going to do again in a similar situation in the future. So you may be asked to tell me about a time when you had to handle a conflict at work. And maybe they ask you about a conflict with a coworker or a conflict with a community partner, to get a sense of how do you react to those situations? What do you do to resolve and solve the problem? Do you debrief after and think about how it could have been prevented and put some new processes in place? They want to get a sense of how you think and how you behave in particular circumstances. Tell me about a time when you showed some initiative, right? Very important. You may not be working in an environment where you have someone managing you all the time or someone there to help you all the time. Are you someone who's going to take initiative? Are you going to be proactive and do things on your own? Tell me about a time when you use teamwork to accomplish a goal or accomplish a task or solve a problem. Most people at some point will be working within a team, whether the team is in the same pod or room as you, whether the team is remote, whether you are a business owner and your team are vendors that you work with, that you have to coordinate with to get some part of your business done and accomplished successfully. And tell me about a time when you had to overcome an obstacle. This is a great question because, again, it helps to determine A, what does someone consider an obstacle? And B, how do they overcome those obstacles? And what was their attitude towards the obstacle and towards being in that situation? Were they blaming other people? Did they see it as a learning opportunity? It tells you a lot about the individual and likely how they're going to react in your work environment in the future. We have this STAR method that we recommend to people to use when they're telling their stories. So you want to talk about what the situation was. So you're going to describe the obstacle, or you're going to describe what the problem was. And then the T is the task. So what was the task that actually needed to be accomplished? What was the end goal supposed to be? And then the A is the action. What did you actually do? So for the A, whenever possible, it's really important to talk about the actions that you specifically took versus the action that your manager took, or versus the action that a team member took. Typically, the employer wants to know about what you've done and what you're capable of doing. And R would be the results. So what was the end result of what you did? What was the end result of your speaking to that customer? Did they then become one of your long-standing customers and a raving fan, and they went out and told other people and brought in more business for you? They want to know, what was the positive result? Usually you want to tell a story that ends up with you being seen in a positive light. So what was the positive result of the action that you took? Your answers should be detailed but concise, so you don't want to ramble on. You want to get to the point. You want to show off your greatest strengths, as I said. So this is your opportunity to really talk about your greatest attributes, your greatest skills. Really shine a light on why you are a great employee, why you would be the best person for this particular job. And you want to stay as positive as possible, even if you're talking about a situation that was negative. So we never want to badmouth previous employers or other people that we worked with, or even customers or community partners, because again, that will show you in a particular light. Are you blaming other people for the circumstance? And how do you deal in tough situations? And we all deal with tough situations at work. And you want to tell a story, as I said before, about you, not about what your manager did or what your coworker did, but something that demonstrates what you actually did and what you're capable of. Employers are looking for these critical success factors. So someone with a positive attitude towards work. Nobody wants to work with anyone who's a negative Nelly. Someone who's got some critical thinking and problem solving skills. So someone who's able to analyze the situation in front of them, think critically about that, and maybe come up with some solutions and implement and put one of those solutions into play. And we realize that not every solution is the best solution. Sometimes things don't work out, but at least you were able to problem solve and try. Proficiency in the field of study. So obviously an employer wants to know that if you're looking to get into a particular industry or a particular type of work, that you have some understanding, some proficiency level already in that field. Flexibility is the next one. So if something happens out of the ordinary, are you able to kind of go with the flow and be flexible and gather up with your teammates to find a way to solve the problem? If you had your day outlined, I was going to do this at 9, this at 10, this at 11, this at 12, and then something happens at 8:30, are you flexible enough to change your schedule to deal with that important thing that's happened and then move on to some of those other things later in the day? If someone comes to you and says, I really need your help with this task, are you flexible enough to be able to help that person when they need the help? Ability to communicate. So everyone wants to hire someone that they feel has the ability to communicate for a variety of different reasons. So you may be a representative of the company and they want to make sure that you can communicate well with their customers. Or you may be responsible for dealing with different departments. They want to feel confident that you're going to be able to communicate what the needs are of the department that you're going to represent to the other people that are participating in the project from other areas of the company. Self-motivation. Are you someone who is self-motivated? Are you someone who can feel empowered and just kind of get up and go every single day? Or are you someone that like constantly needs to be nudged or pushed? Again, these are very important factors for success when employers are looking at particular candidates. Interpersonal skills. So this is how you get along with other people, how you relate to other people, your coworkers, other business partners, the people that walk through the front door to do business with your company, or the people who you deal with via the internet. Maybe you're like a virtual customer service rep. They want to make sure that you're friendly, that you're going to come across as being positive and having great interpersonal skills with the people that you're going to be dealing with. Leadership skills. So leadership isn't always a title. And I think people misinterpret kind of that word leadership. Anyone can be a leader. You don't have to have a title of leadership to be a leader. You could be someone on your team who's knowledgeable, and you're not the manager of that team, or you're not the team leader of that team, but you assume a leadership role in helping your teammates in areas where maybe they're not feeling as comfortable. That's a great demonstration of leadership. And employers want to know that people are willing to take on those leadership roles, even if they're not in a formal capacity. Confidence. So do you display confidence in your everyday tasks? Do you feel sure of yourself? And when you're unsure, do you come to someone to say, you know what, I'm unsure, or I'm not feeling comfortable here, or I need a little bit more information? And then one of the last success factors is teamwork. It's great if you can work independently. Employers want to know that they don't have to micromanage their employees. They also want to know that they can hire someone who's going to work well with other people so that they're not constantly dealing with people conflicts. So teamwork is really important. So there are some questions that an interviewer should not be asking you during an interview because they are illegal, and there really is no reason for these questions. What is your race? Do you have children, or are you pregnant? Are you married? How old are you? What is your religion? Have you ever filed for bankruptcy? Do you have a disability? Are you a Canadian citizen? What is your sexual orientation? These are just samples. There are lots of others, but these are just samples of questions that are illegal for an interviewer to ask you. Now, it could very well be that the interviewer is trying to find out some information about you and perhaps is not aware that they shouldn't be asking these questions. So rather than getting defensive, you can always ask, why do you ask that? And see what the follow-up response is. Perhaps there's a good reason and they didn't know how else to ask you the question. Maybe they want to know about your flexibility for work hours. Maybe they want to ensure that you are legally able to work in the country. Maybe they want to know if you represent a particular demographic because that's the majority demographic of customers that they deal with, and they really would love to have someone who could relate more to their customers. It's never bad to ask, why do you ask that question, and see what the response is. And if you can have a conversation with the employer that will help to alleviate any concern or address something that they want to know about your skill set or experience. Is it okay to be these things, to be nervous? Yes. So everyone is nervous in an interview. I don't know anyone who's not. It shows excitement, and most interviewers understand that you're going to be nervous, so it's not a big deal. I wouldn't worry about it. It's good to practice in advance, as I said, so that you know what it is that you want to share during the interview so that you can be prepared. The more prepared you are for an interview, once you start actually having the conversation, the less you will be nervous, and it will seem more natural for you, and some of your nerves will just start to disappear. It's okay to ask to come back to an interview question if you draw a blank. Sometimes it's a question you weren't prepared for, or that stumps you, or you're not even really sure. Okay, what are they asking? If you're not sure what they're asking, ask for clarification. But if something stumps you, just ask if you can come back to that question later. And most interviewers will say absolutely. They want you to be successful. They want you to do well. It's never okay to complain or display a negative attitude in an interview. You shouldn't complain about your previous boss or your previous teammates or your previous business partner. It speaks more about you than it does about anybody else, and it demonstrates negativity on your part. And again, nobody really wants to hire someone who just has a constant sense of negativity about them. You definitely don't want to be rude to anyone in life in general, but certainly not in an interview. You never know who the person is that you see outside in the parking lot that you're rude to before you walk into the interview. That person could be someone who was supposed to interview that part of the interview that's running late. It could be the receptionist who is the person who will relay information about you to the interviewer. They'll see you leave later and say, you know what, I ran into that guy in the parking lot and he was super rude to me. And you didn't know who that person was. As soon as you get onto the property of that company, you are on, and you better be at your best behavior. So no smoking, alcohol, no substance use during or before your interview. And you want to make sure that you have your cell phone off during an interview. I've heard stories about people's phones going off during the interview, which is not good. If it happens, I guess you just kind of excuse, say my apologies and turn it off. But you certainly don't want to answer the call, which I've also heard has happened. Tips for successful video interviews. So, as I said before, and I'm sure everyone is now aware, there are a lot of companies that are doing interviews right now via video because people are at home. A lot of companies are not necessarily back in the office. And so they may be looking for someone who can work remote. And so the interview is going to be remote. You want to still do your research beforehand. You want to be as prepared for your video interview as you would prepare for an in-person interview. You don't want to be typing and searching stuff on the internet while the person's interviewing you because you didn't look something up or you're not really sure about something. They'll know what you're doing. You want to make sure that you check your internet connection, your microphone, and your camera well in advance of the time of the interview. So the day before, just do a test to make sure that everything is working, that your technology is set up really well, especially nowadays, depending upon whether or not it is a virtual job or remote job. They may want to see that you're comfortable with technology because it may be part of your job that you're going to be using technology on a regular basis. So you want to be prepared for that. You want to ensure that you have adequate light and a professional background so they can see you well, they can see your face, it's not dark shadows. You don't have a picture of your favorite rock band in the background, maybe just a nice neutral background. I've done interviews with people who had like a nice screen in the back, just something very pleasant and very professional. And you want to eliminate or minimize, if you can eliminate, any distractions for yourself and for the interviewer during the video interview. So this means you want your TV to be off. If you've got family members, which is very likely, who are going to be home during the time of the interview, maybe you let them know in advance that you're going to have an interview at 1 p.m. Maybe you put up a little sign on the door so they know not to come in. But just to minimize distractions. If you have pets, maybe you have someone watch the pet at that time just to make sure, there's no barking noises or anything like that during the call. If you're expecting deliveries, perhaps you reschedule it or ask someone else to get the delivery on your behalf. You want to dress professionally. So just because you're at home taking this video interview, it doesn't mean that you should do the interview in your pajamas. So you still want to dress in professional attire, as we spoke about earlier. And that even includes the bottoms. I know some people put on like a nice top and they've got their pajama bottoms at the bottom, but you never know if you're going to have to get up for some reason during the middle of the interview, and how that would look. So I would do like a full body professional outfit. And you want to make sure that you're looking at the camera and not your screen while you're talking so that you're making eye contact. And you're still going to follow up afterwards, even though it's a video interview. You still want to demonstrate interest in the job, and to say a couple things, which we'll talk about after the interview. So you want to find a quiet place after the interview, if that's your car or a coffee shop because it was in person, if it's your home office because it's something that you did at home, and just give yourself some time to reflect on the interview. How do you think it went? And take notes for yourself about how you think it went, anything that you found particularly interesting as a topic of conversation during the interview, maybe something that you want to bring up again when you send your thank you email or thank you note. You want to write down what you know about each interviewer and something important that came up during the interview, or something that was reinforced for you that makes you even more interested in the job now that you've had the interview. And then afterwards, so whether this was an in-person interview or a video or phone interview, you want to send a quick thank you email or a note if you want to send a note. We've seen a couple of people still actually send us notes, which is nice. Just to thank the interviewers, thank them for their time, thank you for considering you as a candidate, and you definitely want to take the opportunity to remind them about your skills, why you're the best candidate for the job, express or reinforce your interest in the position. Now that I've met with you and Sally, I'm even more confident that this is the right fit for me, that this is the job that I'm looking for because it matches my skills as well as my personal values. Interview etiquette. So as I said before, you don't want to be late. And you can avoid this by researching how to get there, and you want to research the time and date that you're actually going. So you maybe know in general what the bus schedule is on that day, what traffic is going to look like, those types of things. And you want to try to arrive at least 5 to 10 minutes early if you can. You want to stay positive and enthusiastic. We talked about that so many times. It's so important. You want to have copies of your resume handy just in case they don't have them. And you're going to greet everyone in a friendly way. We talked about that before. And I've actually seen that in a job that I interviewed for years ago. I found out that after I had been hired, that in the short time I was sitting in the front waiting for my interviewer to come out, I had had a friendly conversation with the receptionist at the front desk, and she and I were just chatting about a variety of different things. And she gave me, positive, she had positive things to say about me after I left my interview to the interviewer, and they took that well. You want to make sure that you're making eye contact, that you're smiling throughout the interview, that you have open and friendly body language. So you're not sitting in the interview with your hands crossed and a scowl on your face the whole time. You want to smile. You want to have open body language, natural body language, so that, you're giving off a sense of friendliness in the interview. In the first interview, you don't want to ask about salary, vacation, benefits. These are things that will come up later, and you don't want to make it seem that that's the only thing you're concerned about with the job. I'm only concerned about the salary, or I want to know about vacation. We haven't hired you yet, and you're already thinking about taking vacation. So when you're coming up with questions to ask the interviewer, those should not be your questions. Your questions should be around maybe something that you saw about the company in the news that you're interested in. Something that would be relevant to your job when you come in, tasks that would be expectations for you to complete maybe within a 1 month timeline, things like that, but never about salary, vacation, or benefits. Those will come later if and when they decide to hire you. At the end, you want to thank the interviews. We put shake hands in brackets. Obviously, this is not happening during COVID pandemic time, but even if you're on the phone, you want to give a nice thank you to them and wish them well. The same etiquette you would have if you were in person and leaving a conversation with someone. And then ask for the interviewer's business card or contact information. You may not have it for everybody there. So maybe you were only in touch with one person to set up the interview, but you want to send your thank you email to both people who interviewed you. You want to just quickly get their contact information so that you can do that. So in summary, you're going to do your homework, you're going to research the company and the position that you've applied for, and you're going to check your resume against that position so that you can talk about the skills and experience that you have in relation to that position specifically. You should know what to expect from the interview, and you can ask when you book the time for the interview, you can ask some of those questions. You definitely should know if it's in person or virtual, but maybe there's some other things about, will I be tested during the interview? Is there anything that I need to prepare for my interview? Those types of things. And as much as possible, use real life examples for your answers, because again, it demonstrates who you actually are, what your capabilities actually are, because I can tell you what I've done in the past and what I'm likely going to do in the future. You want to relax and smile and show them why you're awesome, because this is your opportunity to just show off who you are. Not only to talk about your skills and your experience, those things are important, but for them to understand who you are as an individual, what your attitude is like, whether you're a friendly person or not, whether you'd be someone who's easy to get along with or not. And this one's important too. You want to pay attention. So I said this in the beginning, as much as they are interviewing you, you are interviewing them. You want to pay attention to how people respond to you, how they talk about the company if you ask those questions, right? I've been in interviews and asked my interviewers what are their favorite things about working here and what are their not so favorite things about working here, and see how they respond to the not so favorite things part. You want to gather as much information as you can about this company, about the people that you're going to be working with, so that you can assess, is this where I want to work? And are there any questions?
Hey, Jacqueline. Really good. That was super comprehensive. I was writing down a bunch of questions for myself,
Oh, good.
hit on everything as you went along. But yeah, I mean, same thing happened to me when I went in for an interview in the past, dealing with reception. And it wasn't until after I got the job that they had let me in on the fact that that's standard practice for them. It's people don't
Yeah.
realize that the show's already started when you come into
Yeah.
the building, and they weed out a lot of people because they're rude to the receptionist or not behaving appropriately. And yeah, that was a shocker to me, but a great point that you brought up there.
Yeah. Good.
And
I'm glad.
yeah, and the interviewing the company you're working for. That was
Yes.
always something I never realized I could do. And not only is it smart, so you can see if you fit within their culture, but I think it also shows them that you're
Yes.
actually interested in what they're doing. And you're trying to make sure that if you take this position, you want to make sure it works for you because you intend to be there for a while.
Exactly.
Yeah. So
Exactly.
great point there. What about, so one question that I was wondering was, sometimes there are certain subsidies or benefits that if they hire you,
Yeah.
the company will receive a benefit for hiring you. How
Okay.
do you approach those type of things in an interview? Do you just come out and say, hey, by the way, if you're looking at hiring me, there's these sort of government subsidies out there that you can look at offsetting salary, or is that something you don't get into?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we have, if we're working with a candidate, so someone who's on our caseload, we will often tell them that that could be a talking point for an employer in an interview. Not every employer in Durham or even really in Ontario knows that the Employment Ontario program exists and that there are training subsidies that they can get for hiring a new individual. And that may be a consideration because it can help with kind of that, I talked about that whole dating period in the beginning when you're courting and we're not sure, is the person going to fit in? Now need to take resources from kind of their everyday situation to train this individual. And so the training subsidy will help with some of that. So we will coach individuals on what to say to let the employer know that if you are interested in hiring me, I am currently working with Agilec, and they do offer a training subsidy that may be beneficial for you if you decided to go that way. And then we would request that the employer reach out to us specifically, because then we're able to give them the details about that program.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
As you're answering that, some more questions came in. So, how do we calm our nerves before and during an interview? Sometimes I find myself over talking and going around in circles because I feel like I have to fill up every silent moment.
Right. So we'll deal with both of those things individually. So before, think about something that makes you relax as an individual, and that's different things for different people. It could be music for one person. It could be kind of getting my heart rate up, so maybe I go for a quick jog before I start getting ready for my interview. Maybe I have poetry or kind of positive affirmations that I look at before I go to my interview, because that helps me to relax. So think about what helps you specifically as an individual to feel better and in a positive frame of mind, and do that before you get to the interview. As for the nerves during the interview, having nerves during an interview is absolutely normal. I really believe that one of the best way to combat the nerves is to practice beforehand. If you feel prepared going into the interview, and you don't necessarily have to have, you don't know what they're going to ask you, so you can't have prepared every answer. But if you know, here are the skills that I want to highlight for the interviewer, here are some of the positive success stories I've had from my prior experience that I want to highlight for the interviewer, then you will work on finding ways to throw those stories into the interview because you're already prepared for it. And being prepared is a great way to alleviate some of that stress.
So sometimes they try to catch you off guard, right? Try to put you in an uncomfortable
Yes.
position on purpose to see how you deal with things.
Yes.
What
Yeah.
happens if you are stumped by a question or a question catches you off guard? How do you get yourself through that?
I would say the last part
How do you
again.
get yourself through that situation where you're just kind of frozen? You're just like, oh, I wasn't ready for
Right.
that.
There's a couple things. So it's okay. It's okay that there's silence in an interview. Like, you don't have to fill in every uh, dead air spot, right? So sometimes it may actually come off as not being really reflective if you're answering all the questions right away. Like, before I even get my question out, you already have an answer prepared for me. Are you actually thinking about what you're saying to me? So it's okay to pause and take a moment, and in your head you're like, oh my gosh, like what am I supposed to do with that? But you quickly get over the what am I supposed to do with that, and try to find an answer that you think best reflects either how you would think in the situation, that best reflects the skill that they're asking you about, anything like that. But if you're really stumped, you can say, you know what, can we come back to that question later and move on to the next question? And that gives you time to kind of relax. And then perhaps by the time you come back to that, okay, now I have something to work with. But they do. Sometimes you'll get questions that have, would you rather be a pink flamingo or a gray gorilla? Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Let's see. What is the standard length of CVs in Canada? 1 or 2 pages?
Good question. So 2 pages is the standard. I'm seeing 1 page resumes now as being very popular. And so if you're able to tighten all of your experience and make it concise in 1 page, then that's great. But 2 pages is still acceptable. Anything over 2 pages, I don't know that anyone will read that.
Okay.
And it probably means that you have too much information. Now, if you're looking for the caveat would be if I am trying to get a high level position, and I need to really demonstrate, and you're going to have more kind of quantitative and qualitative stuff on the resume. And I'm really trying to demonstrate as a CEO, um, what I did for my last company and how I increased revenue and how I, did all of these things. That may warrant a longer resume, but in general, 1 to 2 pages is the standard right now.
So if you're trying to go with the new one-page format, where do you see people are whittling things down? So typically in my days, maybe it's old school, but it's your last three places of employment that you put on your experience. Are they shortening the descriptions of what they did there or limiting the number of experiences they have? How do they get it down to the one page?
Yeah, good question. I talked to someone about that this morning, actually, and her resume was 3 pages. And we identified that she had too many points under each
Yeah.
experience. It's okay to have even up to 10 years of experience is fine. So for different people, that's going to be different numbers of jobs. It could be 3 jobs that you had in 10 years. It could be 2. It could be 4.
Okay.
But you want to whittle down the number of points under each job. After about 5 or 6 points, you've lost the reader. I don't want to read 12 points of your tasks and accomplishments under one job. Another area, and it depends on the style of resume that you use, where people kind of go overboard is the top part where they've got highlight of qualifications, or skills, and there's all this stuff listed there. Well, that's a lot of real estate on your resume. So keep that
Okay.
concise and less points under each job.
Okay.
If you're doing a chronological
Right.
resume. If you're doing a skill-based or function-based resume, then the meat and potatoes of your resume is going to be the skills and experiences that you've had up here, and all you're going to do is then just list the jobs underneath with no points under them.
Right. Okay. Staying on the length theme here, my resume is
Yes.
4 pages in total. Does that weed me out as a candidate? I struggle with condensing my resume because I want to include all my great projects.
Right. I get that.
Yeah.
um, do we know what kind of job? Initially, I'm going to say yes. 4 pages is long. Do we know what kind of job that person is looking for? The person who asked the question.
Heba, if you're there, if you could just throw that in the chat, maybe. She doesn't clarify, but I'll keep an eye out for that.
Okay,
But
sure.
I guess
So
if it's 4 pages long, will they remove your resume from even consideration if it's too long? Or do they just not look at everything that's on there?
yeah, I'm not saying that it will eliminate you from consideration,
Okay.
but they probably don't get to the fourth page.
Okay. And here we go.
Like they
So it says, I've been looking for jobs in consulting. I wanted to include all the consulting projects I did with Deloitte.
Okay, gotcha. So it's consulting. So as a consultant, you probably have lots of different projects that you've done. And I understand wanting to share everything that we've ever done and every project we've been involved in and every company that I consulted for. But as I said to Andrew, you're going to lose the person probably on the 3rd page, to be quite honest. I don't know that they'll get to the 4th page. It doesn't necessarily mean that you are eliminated for consideration. It just means that they're not going to see all of that stuff at the end necessarily. So it's hard because you feel an emotional connection to the work that you've done and you want it there for the whole world to see. But it's smarter for you to go back and look at the consulting gigs that you've had. Are you repeating anything in the different projects that you've done? Are there similarities in some of the consulting work that you've done that you can amalgamate so that you're not repeating yourself, which is sometimes what happens and why it's too long. So I did ABC project with this company and ABC project with this company and this company, but if I look at the projects, they're very similar is that necessary for me to repeat on 3 or 4 pages? So I know that we get attached to our work, and it's a reflection of who we are as an individual, and you don't want to feel like I'm taking away part of myself, but you want to be concise as much as possible.
If Heba wanted to connect with you after we wrap up the presentation at the table, would you be willing to kind of look at her resume and maybe give us a
Absolutely.
perfect?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, what happens if you only have had one job, so your experience is really low?
Okay. So if you've only had one job, I would encourage you to look at other things that you've done that were not paid employment. So do you have any volunteer work that you've done that may highlight or showcase some skills that you have that could be transferable to this job that you're applying for or related to the job that you're applying for? Maybe you don't have, I don't know the situation of the person, but maybe you're newly out of school. So you're a new graduate and you've only had one paid job since then. Was there anything that you did in school? Were you the head of a project or head of some kind of social outreach committee or something like that, that again could demonstrate skills that you have that are transferable to the job that you're trying to apply for? That's what I would encourage you to do. So look at other areas other than paid work where you have utilized some of the skills and you have experience that you can talk about on your resume.
Awesome. And that's a really great tie back to an earlier session that we did today. We were talking about
Oh, awesome.
volunteer work and leadership with a couple of Ajax
Yeah.
counselors. So that ties things together nicely, and that answers all the questions we had in the Q&A.